I'm going to stand the whole time. You save your seat. It's okay. It won't hurt my feelings.
Welcome, everybody. There is a seat at the end of the table. I'm Ann Vogel, and I'm the owner of Dragon Tail Books. Welcome, everyone. This is our second in our environmental series.
Where are you going to be? I don't want to be
So today we have Steve Betchkal, and he is environmentalist, ornithologist,
Journalist.
sure. Tree hugger,
yeah.
right? Like
That's good.
filmmaker. So he is here we're going to view and then we're going to talk a little bit about the documentary, The City for the Trees.
Uh-huh.
So thank you for coming.
You bet.
Appreciate
it. Take it away.
Author as well.
Right.
So yes, thank you for coming.
Yes, I wanted to say that I feel bad about this, but I didn't want to invite any other men. It's all right.
You can have Rob come in.
No, it's just that I like the atmosphere. It's going great so far. So I'm going to talk about. We're going to show the movie in its entirety. There are actually 4 parts here. This one, I'm going to explain a little bit. You see this format here? This is part 1. It's called Champion Trees. I did this in 1923 with Micah Davis. I'm sorry, 1923. 2023 with Micah Davis. And so we did it in this format because Micah is 30 years younger than me. And he said, well, let's do it in the vertical format because everybody's on their phones now.
Oh.
And so we did this in that format. The other 3 that we did in 2025 are all horizontal format. And Micah is the person I work with, my teammate, my production mate. And we have won 1 Emmy together and been nominated for 6 together. I've won 6 Emmys, and this is my second last one I won. But we entered the last 3 in the Emmys. They were nominated. They did not win. They were nominated for editing, writing, and science environment series. So 20 minutes, and then we're going to talk again at the end. But I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up here. When we start it, you will see I'm talking. Micah did most of the video. I wrote it. And then you'll see this is about Eau Claire. Anybody here from Eau Claire? I doubt it, right? You're from Menominee or the vicinity, right? But the topic applies to every community, and that's why it's pertinent, and that's why I'm here, because we're going to talk about things that are kind of new and happen in terms like sustainability, green infrastructure, tree inequity, things like that. And so you'll hear terms that are very hot right now, hot button issues when we talk about planning for community. And so that's what I'm going to talk about after the video. So you're going to see some of this, you're going to hear some of it, and we're going to talk more about the issues in this video, this workbook video. So that's where we're going to run it. I don't know if Ann wants to turn anything off or not because he's dealing with a customer, so I'm going to talk a little more in stall. The 4 parts have, it was fun because we got a grant, first of all, a Pablo grant from Eau Claire to do this. And then we got the grant in October. And so we're doing it about trees, and it starts in October. So we had quickly, Micah went out and started shooting fall colors. We did this backwards. He did the fall color before we got the green trees. We had to wait till spring to finish it with green trees. But you see some neat things in here, videographically. Micah has a drone, and so he's soaring over Eau Claire and taking pictures. He has a GoPro on a helmet. So he's riding around, and where he's riding, it can take video all around him in 3 dimensions and cut him out of the video. It's fascinating. Or there's video where we're rolling along. So there's a lot of diversity of video, which I'm very proud of here as a videographer. And I used to work, by the way, for WQOW and WEAU, as that's my job, was my job for 28 years. And then I went independent, and Mike and I do independent stories now. So did you want to stop while we play? Yeah, question?
And what's Micah's last name?
Davis.
Davis.
Do you happen to know him?
No, I know one Micah, and I just want to make sure.
Are we
Yeah,
okay
I'm going
play?
to pause the recording so that it doesn't tell us we're doing copyright things.
And again, I'm going to play it straight through, 4 parts, hopefully it'll play it, and then we'll talk some more. So I'm just going to step out. All right, you made it through the 20 minutes. That was okay, didn't hurt too badly, all right? Even for the delay in the video. I want to point out, first of all, Doug Talamine. You're selling a couple of his books here. He is the god, the guru, of what's called the Pollinator Project, Beneficial Insect Project. All right. One of his policies is that he wants to promote homegrown national parks. And so you can put a sign up in your yard. But the idea is if you turn your yard into a wildlife sanctuary, you're starting at base 0 and you're building a community outwards from from that core, from that center. And so these books are very, very good for that. I want to tell the story. Doug Tallamy came to Eau Claire for a book festival. I think it was the end of 2024 in October. And met him, talked with him, actually hiked with him. We did a little program together. And then we got our grant. And so we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we get Doug Tallamy to be in our video? And so I thought, well, we'll ask him. And so we sent an email out, and he said, sure. And he had a couple of college kids at the university there do the taping, and we got it back, and the college kid had done the video, and I go, oh my God, it's so bad. He was off center, he was floating, the camera was moving, and so we froze one of those and used only the part where the camera wasn't moving. Then he did this picture with it. He was in the middle of this huge field of camera where he's just right in front of a tree, and he was really small. And then I had the other guy, Craig Allen, who is one of the world's foremost ecologists. His title is, he's the foremost authority on tree mortality. What a depressing topic. But he's been all over the world studying about trees. He's been published in hundreds of papers. But Craig is a personal friend of mine. I met him in '78, and we've been friends since. I just saw him last week. He was surfing in Swamigo. And I just saw him, and we had dinner together. But so I thought, well, I got to get Craig from New Mexico, and I got to get Doug Tallamy. So Craig's brother, Brad, taped it and did a beautiful job. Brad is actually a professional videographer, and we used the video from that when Craig did the interview with his brother. So we got those two people, which I think is fantastic, and then local people. Now, you heard a lot of terms. This is about green infrastructure and tree equity, and we talk about density and sustainability and all those things. And so you can actually look at your community. You can go online if you Google tree inequity maps. You can go and you can find this online. We can look for it now too if somebody wants to mess with a computer and pull this down. But you can actually see your community where you live, and there's a map overlaying your neighborhood, and it'll show the amount of tree cover and what the score is for tree inequity. Now, as discussed there, tree inequity means you get all the benefits of trees, all those things in part one. You get a quality of life, you get better health products, you get more shading to save on energy costs. You all those things. Your kids are happier, you heal faster, all those things. You drive slower and safer. So that's tree inequity. So what we say is in impoverished neighborhoods where it's all concrete, they don't get those benefits. So the tree inequity score goes down. You live in a nice neighborhood, your tree inequity score is high. It's good. And then the tree canopy thing is in Eau Claire, the worst spot is the Shopko Plaza. You know where that is? It's a mile square of concrete. It's horrible. Second worst is downtown. It's got 10% canopy. Here in Menominee, I'm going to guess, it's either somewhere over in the developments off of the interstate there where 12 where you have something, but it's not going to be as big as the Shopko Plaza. Or it's going to be somewhere here, downtown where you have a big block without many trees. But the same thing is true. In Eau Claire, we got a problem. Because in Eau Claire, it's build, baby, build because the tax base is down, right? The local governments are in horrific need of tax funding or local revenue funding because the state is withholding funds from them. And so communities like Eau Claire are suffering. And so the mentality in Eau Claire government is, we don't care anything about anything else, we just got to build to get the tax revenue up. Of course, that runs against what you see in here. And so when they build, if you're familiar with Eau Claire, that thing that I make fun of in there, the transit center, in concept is a wonderful thing because it's, using more mass transit is great. But what they did is they built a whole block of one big building going up 4 stories. It goes right up to the street. There's not even a sidewalk there. There's not room for any trees at all. And you can stand in downtown Eau Claire, and I've done this, you can stand in downtown Eau Claire with a camera and turn in 360 degrees and not see one tree. And then you can move a block and do the same thing, and move a block and do the same thing. It's that bad, because they've got huge parking structures. Not as bad here in Menominee, right? But we have to fight, and we did have to fight. In the last 5 years, we did a rezoning. It's called the Century Code in Eau Claire. And I was on a committee called ZTAC, the Zoning Technical Advisory Committee. And this was the pre-process for then bringing it to another committee, which then brought it to the Plan Commission, which then brought it to the City Council to vote on. And so the zoning was that process. So I was the first step, ZTAC. When ZTAC was formed, that committee was formed, guess who was on it? A developer, a developer, a developer, a realtor, and a professional landscape architect from a big firm. So we said, the Chippewa Valley biodiversity community said, well, what about scientists? What about an ecologist? Who do you have on there that's going to represent the scientific community and talk about all these issues, right? And they said, well, and we said, we want somebody on there. And they said, well, oh. I mean, literally. I mean, that's what they said there. I don't know. We probably can't do this. They said, well, we insist. And they said, okay, well, then submit a resume. And I did. I got on there. And so, but I thought, did that realtor have to submit a resume, or that realtor, the developer? No, they were invited on there because the city wants to make it easier for developers to develop because it's going to create revenue. And so my thinking as an ecologist was, I have to look out for the trees, especially, but we were also working on birds. We were working on dark sky issues in that. But the tree process was fascinating. At one point, I can tell you, this is what they're doing on the new zoning code, and this is a big thing. When we build, what we do, right? You take a bulldozer and you clear all the trees, and you start over. And you think about that. How many big trees of 20, 30, 40, 50 years are gone because it's just easier to take them all down and start over because then we can build wherever we want, right? So one of the things we said was, we have to reverse that process. We have to say, when you're going to build something, we're going to have to leave some trees. So we want to put something in place that encourages people to leave trees or penalizes them for removing the trees. And so the process was that if you remove the tree, you have to replace it with so much tree, or you have to pay a fee in lieu of that so that we can buy trees and plant them. So the process was, you take a measurement of the diameter of the tree, and whatever that is, 100% of that diameter, you had to replace 60% of that diameter in trees. So if it was a 30-foot, let's say a 30-inch diameter trunk, and you had to replace 60% of that, it's 20, right? Or something close to that. Let's say 20-something. So you'd have to plant 20 inches of tree. They could be 10 2-inch trees on the property, but that's the trade-off. And it's kind of ridiculous because they're not capturing sequestering the same carbon. They don't do the same thing. It takes them many years to grow up. You don't get the eco-services, another term in there, of the little trees that you do the big tree. So it's not the same thing, right? So we said, all right, you can pay instead. If you want to take down the big tree, you can pay money. But here's the thing. Overnight in Eau Claire, I was on that committee. I went to one meeting, it was 60%. I came back the next meeting, it was 30%. They went behind the doors. The city went behind the doors and dropped it in half. I don't know if there's pressure from the developers. I was outraged. And so we had this big debate in there, but the city didn't back down from it. So we had to fight terrifically to keep other things in place. And there was actually last summer a battle from the Chamber of Commerce, from realtors saying, well, if we do this with trees, that's going to jack the price of your house. There's not going to be any affordable housing in Eau Claire anymore. And so we had this huge campaign. Even the newspaper, the Leader Telegram, took up in favor of this argument. And the whole time we're saying, no. The price of housing is due to the price of plywood. It's due to greedy landlords who are jacking the prices of their places. It's due to the cost of elevators. It's due to the thing that you have to install fire extinguishers. And you can't have asbestos. You have to remove the lead. You have to make sure it's accessible. Those all cost money. The cost of houses will never go down. They're always going to go up, right? And so it's not trees. The truth is, yeah, if we do this, it's going to cost a little money for a developer to have to leave that tree in because they're going to have to work around it, or they're going to have to replace it with other trees or pay the fee. So yes, but they were making it sound like, well, it's going to crowd you right out of buying a house. You won't be able to afford a house anymore if we save these trees, right? And so, yeah, if you buy a $250,000 house, there's going to be more cost in that. But for most people, that's not the case. And so we had to fight very hard to get these things. And so this was created before the vote on zoning to teach people about this issue. And you see the city manager was in this story. She was not a supporter of this. And we found that the plan, the whole city staff was tough. The council, great. We have the greenest council since I've been here, right? But the council is still hearing from the city manager, from the plan commission, from the city planner, from the lawyers, who are all saying, we don't want to do that because we want to make money. We want to build, and and I'll give you an example. Last fall, there was an old transit station where the buses were coming in. And so they now moved to the new transit station that just got finished. The buses are in there. But the argument was, what do we do with that transit station once those buses leave? And it came down to two things right there. It was just simple. Well, we're going to build new apartments, or we're going to turn it into a parking ramp. And I'm in the room going, wait a minute. What about a green space? What about trees? We just did that with the last transit station. We built it right up to the road, and there's no green space at all in there. And we have that ugly downtown. You go to Wausau, and you see what they did with the green spaces in Wausau and La Crosse, other places are thinking like that, right? So I always say, do we want our community You want your community to look like Nairobi or Manila or even Houston or Los Angeles or Miami? Or do you want it to look like Portland or Key West or, like you have it now, where there is some green infrastructure in place and you can actually enjoy that? One of the things that Jane says in the video, and I disagree with, but she says it, and it's a standard conventional way of thinking, you should be able to go out of your house and in 10 minutes get to a green space. Baloney. You should look out your window and have a green space. You should be in your yard and have a green space, right? Because otherwise, you're living in a concrete jungle, there are no beneficial insects, there are no birds. What do you have there, right? And so that's an over-generous simplification of this process. I don't want to go 10 minutes to see green space. I want to go 30 seconds out my door and be there, and look out my window and see that green space. And so this is intentional planning. It's a new idea, a new ethic. When my dad, your parents, had a yard, it was Kentucky bluegrass, pole grass, from the house to the street. He would spray it to death, he would fertilize it, he would mow it twice a week, he watered it like crazy. Now we know that those fertilizers get into our, go into Lake Menominee and make it full of algae. We know that those toxins that you spray on there are killing beneficial insects. We know they're not good for kids or dogs. We know that mowing it is bad for the environment because there's all that gas going in the air. We know that, if you water it, we don't have the water resources with climate crisis coming in to do that perpetually. And we know that the grass goes dormant in the summer, it bounces back. It might not look as good as my dad's yard did, because it was pristine, it was beautiful. But then again, you think, you can throw a football around in that yard, that's great. But you can also reduce that and make a little smaller patch to play football in and then build up some native plants around it and reduce the amount of lawnage from mowing. But our old way of thinking just doesn't work in this small planet kind of thinking that we have. And you have to take your community by the ears and say, no, you can't do it that way. You can't keep doing it that way. And we found that to be the case in Eau Claire. So I'm sure that in every community around Wisconsin, you're going to have the same discussion sooner or later. Where they're going to say, well, we want to take that block and we want to build a big building in there. And you're going to say, well, that sounds good. But then it'll grow up, and then all of a sudden you'll have block after block of concrete and glass and metal. And where are the trees? I'll tell you this, in Eau Claire, the trees are going down. We know that. We know the trees are decreasing. The canopy is not maintaining, it's not getting better because ash trees have died, right? They had to remove, that was the most populous tree in Eau Claire when the ash borer hit, right? About 30% of the trees in Eau Claire were ash. So when those died, we had to remove them. So we know that those are gone. Then there's been development. And so they built a sonotake center. They removed cottonwoods along the river so there was a view of the river. The brewing project came up. They removed cottonwoods along the river so you could see the river. Everything they do, they remove a couple of trees so that you can see the river, which is a nice ethic because it used to be that you put your ugly buildings up against the river and dumped all your sewage into the water. So that's changed at least, right? But the idea is still not to think like, oh, we need to maintain or grow trees, but that a few trees are okay. There's a tree over there. What are you complaining about, right? But the idea is that, what about the beneficial insects? And what about the birds? And what about the eco-services that you receive and the quality of life you receive from having those trees? And so that way of thinking has to be rather intentional instead of just accidental. And so I've talked a lot about that, but that's the gist of it. And I wonder if you have any questions you want to direct.
Were you able to, so it sounds like it was a hard battle.
It was.
With the city.
It was really hard.
But like downtown, how many trees line your downtown?
We did not make any actual physical process as in getting more trees downtown. No. What we did is the grandfathered clause about the zoning change is that at some point, like right now, people will apply for a development and they will have to follow the new rules. But as of December and January and February, those were still the old rules. And so any moment now, we will see the first thing come to the Plan Commission that will have to follow those new rules. And those replacement values and in lieu of fees will have to kick in. So we're going to see that. Now our pressure on the city to plant more trees is being heard. They've heard it. Well, I know they've heard it. We've been to council meetings and made a lot of noise. And like I said, the people on council are willing. They're good folks, and they want to do the right thing. And that's what we keep saying, is it's the right thing to do in this age is to think green. And they want to do that. Their hands are sometimes tied, And we had, when it came down to vote, we had a lot of council people that voted in favor of affordable housing over trees when it came down to voting on the issues, right? And so we had to make some concessions. We held firm on some, but we had to make some concessions, which weren't big deals in the end because we still got what we wanted to. And our tree ordinance is now one of the strongest in the state. We were modeling on places, there's some Twin Cities places, some Illinois places, other places in out east that have some really strong tree ordinances. Now we think ours is one of the strongest in the state of Wisconsin now too, because of what we did. We really pumped up the volume on the tree protections and the replacement values. If you were asking me, should they be better? Oh yeah. Yeah, I think they should be 100% replacement rate. And I said that in the meetings, but no one's buying that. You take down a 24-inch diameter oak, you should be replacing it with that much because, those 2-inch trees or 1-inch or 2-inch trees that you're planting, we don't even know if they're going to live to 5 years of age or 10 years of age, So you got to be really intensively practical about replacing those trees to keep that canopy going, right? I want to say one more thing. You don't need big trees to do the job. Little trees work. Prairie plantings work. Prairie plants are fantastic for capturing, sequestering carbon because they have all those roots. A prairie is just as good as a forest at sequestering carbon. And so you can plant prairie plants, you can plant small plants, you can plant medium trees, you can layer the trees. You don't have to plant a big oak to make the same initiative. And tree cover is kind of a misleading thing because the green in your space doesn't have to be the big oak. It can be the prairie plantings. It can be the service berry. It can be the smaller plants in your yard. The butterfly weed and those things too are also green infrastructure. So.
Thanks, great segue. So everyone come on Thursday at 6. We're going to talk native plantings.
Good, perfect, yes, wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the Urban Forestry Board here in Menominee, along with several other people in this room.
Good to know that.
And also what you're talking about makes me realize that our focus, in that board is very narrow, and really we should have some of our focus be on things like the Planning Commission, and those, who is speaking for the trees on the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think I had really thought about that. So.
We found this in a very practical sense. You can rant, you can go up in front of council and you can read your letters, but you have to find the exact pressure point. And the exact pressure point is often a line in the code. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we did, for example, it said, when you replace those plants, it should be ? And we jumped on it. We said, all right, when you replace that diameter, we said, we're going to make the list. Our Urban Forest Board got involved in CVBP, the Chippewa Valley Biodiversity Partnership, said, we'll make that list for you. And so we scientifically sat down with experts and we made a list of native plants, climate hardy species that are looking good for the next 30 years that can handle the heat, right? And the keystone species, right? And so our list said, all right, when you do that planting, you have to pick 75% from our list. The other 25%, you can do burning bush if you want.
Yeah,
you can do that if you want, but 75% have to be from that native climate hardy list. So that's a pressure point where you say, all right, where do you take hold of what you can really do? Because you can say forever, we want more trees. And city council will say, great, we agree. And that's where it ends. That's where it ends, right? And so when we did this, we had to say, even now, our urban forest boring is saying, well, now we need to look at boulevard trees. And so we're ahead of that process. We're saying, well, what do we do with boulevard trees? Because this was only public, like private development, private development, not public. And so some of it was overlaid into public property. But if you have, what you do in your yard is essential to the process, right? But we don't have control over that. Like, what do you do in boulevard trees, and how do we encourage people to do boulevards? So we're thinking about how to redesign a boulevard. There's a thing called a silva cell. It's a block you can put in the ground, and it's like a pot for a tree. It's a big thing with good soil in it, so that the roots can stay in there, and they don't have to compete with the salt from the street, or they don't have to worry about the hard, bad soil that's underneath that sidewalk. And then we're talking about going around a tree with a sidewalk. We're talking about reducing street sizes so that the boulevards are wider. You can plant a bigger tree in the boulevard. And so we're addressing that now as part of our process of saying, getting ahead of this, rewriting that boulevard code, which the city is doing because we're talking about neighborhood, redesigning these, what do they call them? Not constitutions, but the
ordinances?
Yeah, now there's a word for it. I'm losing it here, but
Covenant?
anyways.
Oh, covenant.
Yeah, some of the covenant is similar to a covenant. Some of in Eau Claire, there are some places that have neighbors that have covenants and others that aren't covered by covenants. The ones that are covered by covenants doesn't apply because they have their own rules, right? And so, but here we're trying to get ahead of the reshaping of these local things by getting with our urban forest board by saying we're going to ask them to do this, and when it comes up the next battle, we're ready for that. Because we learned the hard way. Boy, I got on the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and there was a city planner running the meetings, and he would just set things out and say, "What do you think of this?" And we'd rubber stamp it, and I'd go like, "Huh." And we didn't really have any say on that at all. And then it took me a couple months to realize that we were just patsy. They would just put something in front of us and say, "Here, what do you think?" And we would say, "Well, that looks pretty good." And then he'd say, "Oh, great," and they'd take it away and they'd make a policy out of it. We realized that, well, if we want to say anything, we got to be ahead of that sheet that he puts down. And so we had to start thinking ahead of that city planner, because otherwise they were simply using us. They were saying, "Oh, we'll just make an idea and then show it to them, and then and we'll control the agenda." And that is what happened. The city planner controlled the agenda until we took it from the city planner and made it ourselves as the committee, the president and vice president of the sustainability committee then took it over. But the city was very controlling. And Eau Claire, love them or hate them, that's what we're facing. So. I don't know about Menominee how it works, but I'm sure city government doesn't alter that much over 30 miles, right? Yeah.
I was just wondering, how do you engage the university? Because the university seems to have a nice relationship to their urban forest.
Yeah, honestly, I think the university is like an island unto itself. We ask the university for help. Kids are transient. You can't depend on the students because we've had some great help from students until May comes and they graduate or they leave and then they're gone. And so we did have a couple interns that were very helpful and very committed to this whole idea. But the university itself seems to kind of do its own thing. I can tell you the example that I use is the bird-safe glass that we put in this ordinance. 10 years ago, I went to the university and I said, we've got big buildings that are killing birds. Most of the birds that die from collisions are due to diurnal impacts on the first and second floors of the building. So we said, we want to put things in your windows. And they brushed us off. So we said, well, all right, you've got this big building that's being built. It was the Davies Center. Will you make it bird-safe glass? I don't know. They didn't. Then the next one came up. It was the Sonintake Center. We said, will you make that bird-friendly glass? Well, you maybe. No. So now the Phillips Science Center is being built. And I talked to the head of the university, and I said, look, we've asked you 3 times. Is the new Science Center very appropriate building to have bird-friendly glass? Will you make it finally bird-friendly? I said, yeah, we're going to make it bird-friendly as we heard you. So it took 3 buildings to do that with the university. Now, when we did this process with the city, there are staff people from the university that have come to the meetings and gotten involved. The university, 0. I mean, they're not present. And so I'm discouraged by that. Maybe Stout is better, and maybe there's a little bit more urgency or energy of the university to get on board and do that. In the end, after we fought and asked, they were empathetic and supportive in the end, but they haven't been, unfortunately, supportive from the start as we had hoped.
So what I can imagine is for any smaller or mid-sized community, it's just really hard to make that mind shift and investing in expertise and the manpower.
That pressure point I'm talking about.
Because when you say you changed ordinance and so forth, I mean it's reinforcement. So how do you make sure that ordinance was actually followed?
Yeah, that we're doing now.
That
we're doing now. That's the next step. But just getting it implemented, I'll tell you a story. We had part of the dark sky process. I saw it coming through the ZTAC. I saw it and I said, whoa, dude, this isn't on point. This is off. They were talking about light numbers that were just coming out of nowhere. I thought, well, what on earth are you talking about? And I said to the engineers, planning department engineers, I said, these are not practical dark sky things. I mean, we want to have these things focused down on the ground, not spreading out and bleeding all over the place. And his response was, well, this is a life or death issue. We're stopping the bad guys. And I said, well, what the science says is that when there's glare, you can't see the bad guys. They hide there in the glare, in the dark, and that's when they get you because you can't see them. You ever do the experiment? You ever seen a thing online where there's a light And there's two photos. The first light is without the hand, blocking the light, and you can't see anything except the glare. And then a hand comes in front of the light, and there's a person standing there right under the light. You can see him finally because you cut the glare out, right? And so I said to this guy, you know, you've got industrial properties, and you've got a big light on the edge of the property. It's half of its light is going off the property, right? What if you had a triggered light triggered by motion sensor light? Any bad guy that came to the fence and was climbing in the dark and the light came out and go, yeah, I'm out of here because, you know, I'm exposed, right? So the idea was shine the light in your parking lot, make motion sensor lights. They had no clue. But what we did, we found an academic expert. He actually, two of them. One was at the Beaver Creek Reserve, and he was an astronomist. And another one was a professional who went around talking to businesses about their light design. As a bird person, I'm an ornithologist. When I came to the city, they kind of went, whatever, dude. You know, they just blew me off time and time again. I had to keep saying, no, wait. I insist we do this, right? And then they would kind of begrudgingly do that. But when I brought that expert in, they said, okay, you design it. You tell us what to write in there. And they redesigned the whole thing. We have this beautiful dark sky code now because that guy who was an expert in his field said, no, you got to change those numbers to be this and this and this. And they said, oh, okay, you're the expert. We'll do that then. I wasn't an expert to them. But this guy, because he was a professional consultant, was good enough for them. See, so if you find that right person, you know, if that's a university staff person or somebody, a retired person in the community, you got to find that person perhaps that has that, you know, gravity, prestige, clout to do that, and then apply that pressure point. And that, it was marvelous to see. I mean, that we made more movement on the dark sky thing than we did on birds or trees because that one guy, well, and one and a half guys, there were actually two of them, but that one guy just sat down and said, yeah, let's meet and we'll do it together. And they said, okay. It was that easy for that, right, the dark sky part. So. All right, well, thank you very much for
Thank you so much for coming. I did find our map.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, which is.
Oh, it's not here?
So never mind.
Okay.
But it is that kind of Walmart. But actually, it looks like Stout might be a.
You got it on there?
It might be.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Might be
it.
a.
And
so
you can actually zoom in on your part of town, and it'll tell you a tree equity score and a tree canopy score.
Yeah.
And you can tell, you know, which are the weakest parts in the community, which are the strongest parts in the community.
So overall, we're an 87.
You're
Pretty good.
Tally
Yay.
says you should have 75% tree cover. That's pie in the sky. You know, Claire's is like averaging under 30.
But they
So I'm
count,
sure Menominee must be, you know, averaging like 30-ish too.
they must count the lake as a green space.
Ah!
But
There's a lot of river.
No, you don't count the river.
Okay, so
Well, I
you
don't
don't count the
No,
lake.
the river doesn't count it.
it's green on here though.
Yeah, but that's
Menominee.
counting the maybe riparian corridors. Maybe the riparian corridors around the river
Okay.
and around the lake, but the lake can't trigger that green score. No. See, like in Eau Claire, the greenest community is the 3rd Ward, which is just off downtown because it has Putnam Park. There's this huge parkway through it, and that's where it's high. I told you the worst one is Shopko Plaza. 2nd worst is downtown Eau Claire.
Yeah.
But you can see, and there are places near the airport that are bad. Right? And that's lower priced apartments and rentals down there too. And so the tree inequity score goes down, you know, because they don't have the same benefits. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And as I said, this Thursday at 6, if you want to take the rest of our environmental series.
And thanks for doing
Talking
this,
native
Anna.
plants.
That's really
so,
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good to
So
see you,
thank all
Steve.
for coming.
Good to see you, Nine. Hey, did you sign up for the team yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
I will.
All right. What are the dates for posting?